So thank you for watching this video. In the last video I showed you how to access MATLAB through Desktop Anywhere. Today I'm briefly going to go over the general features that you have on MATLAB, what you see when you first start up MATLAB. Now you'll notice that I'm using MATLAB 2012A. If you're running it off Desktop Anywhere, you'll probably be using 2014A. If you have another version, it might be different from this. I'm going to use 2012 because this is the version which I've got on my computer. As I mentioned in the previous video, there's not that much difference between each of the different versions. The main thing you'll see in 2014, which you don't see in this one, is that you've got some extra features up here in terms of plotting features and things like that. But generally, when you're using MATLAB, I think using these sort of features is bad practice in a way. You should really script them instead of using the features, because if you're doing it for one different thing, but you've got to rerun that again. If you every time you're wanting to plot, you're having to go to plot, add labels and things, it'd be a nightmare, and it's not very good practice, and it's not very good to then share your code afterwards. So I'm happy with the features that this version has. As I mentioned before, if you want to get your own version of MATLAB, you can get this from the MathWorks website. If you're a student, you can get this for around £30, and I'll put the link in the information for this video. So I'm going to talk a bit about some of the main features that we have in MATLAB. So when I started up MATLAB, this editor window wasn't there, so I'm just going to take it away again. The first thing that you normally do if you're going to be using MATLAB is that you will open up a new editor window. So if you're on 2014, I think it has a picture of a paper and then says new. On here you can just see it's down as a new page. If you hover over it, it says new script, so you open this up. This opens up the editor window, so this is where you're going to be writing your bits of code. And although you can write code in the command window, as soon as you've written it, that's done and dusted. You can go back and change it, but it's a nightmare if you're working on long projects. So generally you'll be using the editor 99% of the time. Using anything other than the editor, maybe the command window, is more for maybe checking certain values or something like that. So yes, editor is where you do your scripts, where you write your scripts, and you can just write anything in here. As long as MATLAB's happy to accept it, then you can write it in there. If you see at the top here, you can see that it says what my current folder is. So my current folder at the moment, I'm in the folder that I've stored these MATLAB videos in that I'm making for this series, and so this is basically the address bar. Now, one thing that this is handy for, if you want to know, sometimes when you're writing scripts, you might have data that's stored in a particular folder, and this basically suggests the directory address format that you'll be using. So, for example, if I wanted to if I have my data in this folder, you might want to change directory to that folder, and you'd just be able to double click on that and then copy it, and then you could just swap it over there. To copy it then I use Command and C. If you're on a Windows computer, it'll be Control and C. Likewise, when you then want to copy it over, it'll be Control and V on a Windows computer and Command and V on a Mac. So as well as having the address here, you've also got this bit of information here. This is basically detailing what's in this current folder. So we've got two different videos. We've got an MP4 and a .mov version of this Desktop Anywhere tutorial I gave briefly before. Now, if one of these was a map file, you can see here that it's got some information about the file. Because it's MP4, MATLAB isn't going to natively understand it, so there's no details. If this was a MATLAB file, when you clicked on it, it'll have a list of the variables and maybe some of the sizes of each of those variables. So it's quite handy being able to look at that before committing to open it, especially if it's a very big variable file. So on the right hand side, we've got the workspace. Now the workspace is where you store any variable that you're doing. So I'm just going to, briefly as an example, I'll just create a variable called A and say that's equal to 1. Now you can see that this has come up in here saying name A, and this is basically meaning that it's a regular variable, a matrix variable, and the only value in there at the moment is 1. So this will give you a lift to your workspace. Now if you had several different variables, this will also give you the dimensions. So if I just do, as an example, I'll say you can see here, so I've just made this variable full of zeros. We'll go on to those sort of commands later, but I've just done it for example. And this is saying that the dimensions of this are 160 by 240. Now this is handy when it comes to plotting, for example, or when you just want to see why your code is maybe saying that the dimensions are wrong. It's handy to be able to just look in the workspace and see these values. Now you can see the command history is basically simply what it says on the tin. It's got a list of your previous commands. So you can see I've done a equals 1 and a equals zeros, and basically how I created that variable up there. And so that's a list of all your commands. Now this will carry on storing until you delete it. Even if you close MATLAB, this will still store these commands in there. Now one thing I've noticed, which is quite handy, if MATLAB crashes for one reason or another, normally because you haven't structured your statement correctly and they've created some ridiculously big variable or something similar to that, it tends to still store those commands in the command history. So if you've maybe written a script there but forgot to save it, then ran it, you tend to be able to find it in the command history if it has ended up closing down. Not always, but it's definitely worth having a look before you fret too much. Now, the command window, as I mentioned before, you'll generally be writing your scripts in the editor window. But the command window is handy for small statements. So when I wrote these, I just wrote it in there. And it's basically a way that you can directly interact with MATLAB operations in the command window. Whereas with the editor, you'll interact with the editor and then the editor will send things to the command window. In addition to that, one thing that I didn't mention before, you can see these features at the top. So you can see, you can make a new editor window. So you can tab editor windows. And you can also save editors, of course. You can go back statements and forward statements. And then this is a very important button. If you're on another version of MATLAB, it maybe looks slightly different, but generally it's this kind of green play button. And this runs the statement. So if you were to write something in there and then press this, it'll run it. Now, I've pressed the play button because I don't have any content in there and I haven't saved anything. It's come up with this suggestion to save. So if you've got some statements in there and you want to run them, you do have to save them first. So that's why it was prompting me to save when I clicked that button. So in the next session, I'll talk about some of the simple commands that you can use with MATLAB. Thank you for listening to this brief tutorial. Thank you.